Were our voices really heard? One figure in the industry says maybe not. But before we get into that, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button and the bell icon for notifications. And of course, before we jump into that, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors at Hellebarde Games. Hellebarde publishes the modules that they would like to play. Whether it's 5th edition, OSR, Castles and Crusades, Old School is in play at the tabletop, and you can pick up Hellebarde Games products at Drive-Thru RPG or directly from their website at hellebardegames.com. So let's get into it. I actually saw this article a week or so ago, and I kind of been digesting it. It's kind of an interesting take. But I wanted to share it with you guys, and I want your opinion on this, because this is not just a nobody. This is not just some random guy who's saying this. Let's get into what exactly it was that he wanted to talk about. So this is an article by Paul Alexander Butler. This is over on ICV2, which is a hobby industry business website, and I'm going to link directly to this article below. But Mr. Butler has kind of an interesting take on the blow up over Wizards changing the OGL, and now that we've kind of gotten a little bit of distance from the epicenter, I thought it would be a good time to look at this perspective. So again, understanding this came out on February 3rd. It is February the 14th when you're seeing this. So there's been a little bit of distance, but he says, well, that was a ride, wasn't it? The web is overflowing with hot takes on Wizards of the Coast positively disastrous few weeks regarding the future of Dungeons & Dragons and their open gaming license. Everybody from gamers to lawyers and streamers to publishers was weighing in with their thoughts online, while even mainstream media and NPR were giving it some attention. And he says, hot take, I'm not going to give you another hot take. And he breaks it down point for point from his perspective on this. And I think it merits mentioning before we dive straight into it that Mr. Butler is not just a columnist. He's not just a retailer. He is co-founder of Gaming Days LLC, the parent company of Free RPG Day. And Free RPG Day is something, fans, that I partake heavily in. I have I shouldn't say I've always, but for many years, I have run Free RPG Day events for friends who have an FLGS. So, again, I think he's got I think he's got a little bit of authority on this, but do we agree with it? Let's see. So his first point, I'm never playing D&D again. I'm getting rid of all my 5 ebooks. This is a hypothetical that he's discussing here. I don't think he's saying that. And he says, great, sell them to me. My store does a sizable business in used RPG books, and D&D 5 ebooks very rarely show up in the used department. I've already encouraged a number of players who've sworn off all current Dungeons & Dragons offerings and are looking at other systems or earlier editions. Well, that's awesome. If you're encouraging people to look at earlier editions of D&D, this streamer heartily approves. I'm happy to provide both a way for them to unload their 5 ebooks and a selection of out-of-print editions that may be more to their liking. Hey, that's pretty cool. Do you sell secondhand RPGs? And again, I think that's directed at people in the industry. Let's all play Pathfinder instead, he opines. Wonderful. Whether it's Pathfinder, Dungeon Crawl Classics, 13th Age, Fantasy Age, or any of the other countless other fantasy RPGs out there, I've got the stock to support your new lifestyle choices. With Paizo and Goodman Games reporting record sales, and we did a piece on just how much the third parties blew up over the OGL debacle with their own offerings, You can bet I positioned myself to take advantage of that desire. And indie RPGs are having quite a moment too. Thirsty Sword Lesbians, Thousand Year Vampire, Old School Essentials, The Quiet Year. I've seen huge sales spikes recently in these and many more since my earliest days doing peer-to-peer seminars at trade shows. I've extolled the virtues of stocking weird indie RPGs as part of your assortment. Are you a D&D store or are you a role-playing store? As retailer Gary Ray once famously said, and I'm paraphrasing here, don't pick sides in the edition wars. Be an arms dealer instead. That's you got to appreciate that. Let's boycott the D&D movie. I mean, whatever. You do you, but I will say this. That is, he will say this. There's a certain kind of customer who will want to complain and argue about how horrible Wizards of the Coast is. The big bad corporation is an easy target, and it feels kind of good to fight the man and talk about how awful they are. And he says this to retailers now. He encourages you not to engage in those conversations. I used to have a whole 10 minutes in one of my presentations devoted to convincing store owners and retailers to stop complaining about the big bad WotC and Games Workshop of the world. Why would you vocally and publicly criticize a publisher that is very likely to produce some of your biggest product lines? Don't do it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, be an arms dealer. Don't take sides. Now, here he says something, and I don't agree with this, and it kind of comes to the crux of the argument. I'm a little fish here, and I'm not, I'm not calling him out, but I'm just saying I don't agree with this premise. I maintain, as he maintains, the vast majority of D&D fans are mercifully oblivious about the recent OGL drama. Look, I get it. I get confirmation bias. I understand. But I don't agree with that at all. Everyone I talked to, everyone, friends of my kids who play D&D were telling them about what was going on, and it was filtering back to me through my two daughters. Like, they know all about this. All this is going on. I think fans of D&D are, because of D&D, because of Wizards of the Coast, are a lot more wired and online and know a lot more about this than he's giving them credit for. But what happens when those casual D&D players are in your store and you're grumbling about how Wizards is awful and D&D is ruined? You've created an environment that is decidedly not welcoming to that person. And that's another point I don't agree with. You might have created an environment where that person starts to ask questions about D&D, but go back to his earlier premise about alternate games. Suggest an earlier edition. Suggest, a different game. Old School Essentials, Swords and Wizardry, Osric, any number of indie games. The new Aliens RPG, Tales from the Loop. Hell, West End Games Ghostbusters if you happen to have a copy in a poly bag on the wall. But the point is, you don't necessarily just create this toxic time bomb. And you'll never capture those under-monetized dollars that way. Again, disagree. Because if somebody comes in and they're like, hey, I've heard about it. Well, Wizards of the Coast, they got some issues, and I'm not crazy about them. They're doing some nasty stuff. Oh, okay. But here's a nice company. It's, Black Blade. Here's another company. Oh, go away, Windows. Here's a raft of other things you can look at. Although, ultimately, that is all in presentation. I mean, if you're a comic book guy about Wizards of the Coast, that's going to turn anybody off. But that's for another discussion. But anyhow, that's his article. I agree with a bunch of it. I don't agree with a few of his premises. And I don't, I don't necessarily agree that the majority of people's voices went unheard, and or rather that the majority of people didn't care and that we had no impact on it. So as always, I want to know what you guys think. Please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think. Do you think Paul is right? Do you think do you think he's wrong? So we'll see. We'll hash it out in the discussion below. We'll be back a little bit later with another video, and of course tonight we have a live stream. It is Tuesday night, so we will be playing some first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I hope to see you all then. Until then, everyone, have an absolutely wonderful day. And again, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, click the subscribe button and the bell icon for notifications. I'll see you guys around later. Peace. Support your local gaming store.